You've just been bitten by a female member of the Aedes species mosquito, the same mosquitoes that spread the Zika and chikungunya viruses. These insects are commonly found in tropical and subtropical climates, so this occurrence makes sense during your semester abroad in India. What you don't realize quite yet is that this bite infected you with one of the 4 dengue virus serotypes caused by a virus of the Flaviviridae family. The dengue virus has been transmitted to you from another victim of the virus, and acting fast is advisable. Here's what you need to know about dengue. You don't feel any symptoms yet, and you may never, as some dengue infections are asymptomatic, but don't get your hopes up. 75% of infections from the virus are symptomatic. Over the next 5 to 7 days of incubation, you'll begin to understand most everything about your ailment, from its history to the effect it has already begun taking on your body. If you're unfortunate enough to be symptomatic, you will continue to be educated while you suffer through its phases. First, let's talk about the virus's geographical presence. You'll be surprised to learn that nearly half of the global population resides in areas with dengue risk. How come you've never heard of it, you ask? Although there has been a number of local dengue outbreaks in the States in recent years, most, if not all, were contracted outside of the country and led to relatively small outbreaks. Additionally, you're even less likely to have encountered dengue being from Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the elevation is roughly 7,300 feet. The mosquitoes carrying the virus very rarely dwell in elevations higher than 6,500 feet. As for the rest of the world, the CDC lists 75 countries at a frequent to continuous level of risk, with the majority being in South America and the Pacific Islands. Next, we'll talk about the history of the virus and how it survived. But first, you must hear some unpleasant news. It's been 5 days since infection, and your symptoms have started. You've entered the febrile phase, which usually lasts 2 to 7 days. Febrile means you have or are showing symptoms of a fever, but in this phase, it can be biphasic, like many cases of COVID-19. Additional symptoms you start to feel may include muscle, joint, bone, and retroorbital eye pain, headache, rashes, and a number of hemorrhagic manifestations. For now, just try and stay hydrated, get rest, and avoid drugs with anticoagulant properties such as aspirin and ibuprofen. Unfortunately, there's no treatment as far as specific antiviral agents, so all you can do is follow methods of supportive care as just listed. Hang in there. Now back to history. Historians cite the Jin dynasty, which existed from the 3rd to 5th century, as the first known occurrence of a dengue case or an illness resembling it. In the 18th century, 3 epidemics occurred that are now known as dengue fever in the port cities of Cairo, Jakarta, and Philadelphia, suggesting that it had been spread via ships. It was not elevated to pandemic status until the 20th century, or World War II to be more specific. Soon after, a scientific trio comprised of American microbiologist Albert Bruce Sabin and Japanese physicians Susumu Hota and Rin Kimura isolated and cultured the virus. According to Britannica.org, in the 1950s, hemorrhagic dengue appeared in Southeast Asia. The serotypes continued to spread on a pandemic level, eventually reaching areas of South and Central America, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, where in 1977, an epidemic lasting from July to December affected some 355,000 people. In the following decades, the increasing incidence of dengue, particularly DHF, persisted. In 2008, the World Health Organization reported that approximately 2.5 billion people worldwide were at risk of dengue, and that the disease was endemic in more than 100 countries. From 2010 to 2016, the number of dengue cases recorded globally increased from 2.2 billion to 3.34 billion. Cases increased sharply in 2019 and 2020, with outbreaks across countries in the Western Pacific region, Africa, and the Americas. Now that we've discussed the known history of the virus, let's talk about transmission and contraction. As mentioned earlier, mosquitoes of the Aedes species can spread the virus by biting an infected person and giving it to the next person through a bite. Additionally, expectant mothers can pass the virus to their fetus, and there is documentation of transmission of the virus from mother to child via breast milk. Furthermore, infected blood can spread the disease, so as enticing as it may sound, sharing needles is not suggested. The modes of transmission beg the question, what does the dengue virus look like? Firstly, all viruses are protein-packaged genes. As previously mentioned, dengue belongs to the Flaviviridae family, which are positive single-stranded RNA viruses, and they possess viral envelopes composed of both viral and host cell molecules. The virus's protein coat contains the fusion peptide dengue virus protein E. Fusion peptides result from genes coding for multiple different proteins joining at the N-terminal end of membrane fusion proteins. The fusion of the virus in the cell membrane can likely be attributed to the fusion peptide's hydrophobic region of polar residues. Speaking of hosts, although there is limited data on enzootic dengue, cases in non-human primates as well as bats, dogs, pigs, and other animals have been recorded. Before we continue any further, you should be aware that you have just entered the critical phase. This is the turning point. Either your fever subsides and you move on to the convalescent phase after 24 to 48 hours, or you progress to severe dengue due to increased vascular permeability. If this progression occurs, the initial onset will appear nearly harmless, as physiological mechanisms are compensating for the body entering shock. But soon, possibly fatal hypotension ensues, often accompanied by cardiovascular and respiratory distress. While we're waiting for the results of your fate, we'll lastly discuss preventative measures. According to the CDC, in June 2021, the U.S. Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommended use of Dengvaxia to prevent dengue in children aged 9 to 16 years, with laboratory-confirmed previous dengue virus infection and living in areas where dengue is endemic. Now, for those who haven't been infected, precautionary measures such as insect repellent, long sleeves, and air conditioning can help prevent mosquito bites, especially in endemic areas. Despite the vast amount of information on the dengue virus not covered in this film, unfortunately, our time has to come to an end. You made it to the other side. As you eagerly listened and absorbed this overview of the virus while staying hydrated and well-rested, your body steadily inched back to normalcy following defervescence. The virus is no longer replicating in your body, and you are free to go back to your peaceful semester abroad. Have a dengue day.
And I hope that's helpful.